In the 2000s, South Korea was terrorized by a serial killer whose crimes were as shocking as his nickname, the Raincoat Killer. He preyed on victims in broad daylight while dressed in a simple raincoat, evading capture for years. But who was this elusive predator, and what led to his eventual capture? The story of Yoo Young-chul, the notorious serial killer who became known as the Raincoat Killer in South Korea. His case sent shockwaves through the country, lasting over several years and involving a relentless manhunt by authorities. Yoo Young-chul's first known crimes began in 2003. He initially targeted elderly women, robbing and brutally murdering them. Over time, his victim pool expanded, and his violence escalated to include younger women and even men. His victims were often murdered with a hammer, and he sometimes left their bodies in public places, making the crimes even more chilling. Yoo's raincoat became his trademark. He would wear a raincoat while committing his murders, leading the media to dub him the Raincoat Killer. The raincoat not only served as a disguise, but also allowed him to appear harmless, blending in with the everyday crowds in South Korea's busy streets. He would often approach victims under the pretense of needing help or looking for something, only to turn on them once they were alone. His use of blunt objects like hammers, which could be easily concealed, showed how methodical and brutal his killings were. The police quickly realized the pattern and started connecting the dots between different murders. Despite the rising death toll, investigators struggled to identify the killer. Yoo's choice of victims, random and seemingly unrelated, made it difficult to find a motive. His careful choice of murder sites, which were often areas with little to no surveillance, added to the challenge for law enforcement. The press played a significant role in the case, both in raising public awareness and putting pressure on authorities. The killer's nickname, the Raincoat Killer, was coined by the media, and it resonated with the public, symbolizing the chilling nature of his crimes. The media's coverage also stirred fear throughout the nation, and many people became terrified to walk the streets alone, especially in areas he had previously struck. The turning point in the investigation came when the police finally found a link between the murders and the suspect. Surveillance footage from an area near one of the crime scenes showed a man wearing a raincoat. This was crucial evidence that led to the identification of Yoo Young-chul. Yoo Young-chul's early life was marked by trauma and instability. Born in 1970, he grew up in a dysfunctional family. He had a history of violent behavior, including assaults on his family members, and was known to have been deeply resentful of women. His crimes seemed to be fueled by a combination of hatred towards women, financial desperation, and a desire for control. Authorities described Yoo as a classic psychopath, someone who lacked empathy and had a desire to inflict pain on others. His motivations were often unclear, but his crimes seemed to reflect a deep-seated anger, particularly towards women. The brutality of his attacks and his apparent lack of remorse suggested that he derived some form of pleasure from inflicting violence. After years of searching, Yoo Young-chul was finally caught in 2004. His arrest was the result of an intense investigation that involved painstaking work by the police. Yoo's capture occurred after a victim survived an attack and gave a description of the assailant. This led investigators to his location in Seoul, where they arrested him at his home. Upon his arrest, Yoo Young-chul confessed to the murders of at least 21 people, though some estimates put the number higher. His confession was chilling, detailing how he would often lure victims to secluded areas before executing them. The police found disturbing evidence in his home, including blood-stained clothing and weapons linked to the murders. His arrest brought relief to the public, but also shock and disbelief. Many wondered how someone who seemed so ordinary could be capable of such heinous acts. The case highlighted serious flaws in the investigative process at the time and underscored the terrifying reality that serial killers can often blend seamlessly into society until they are caught. Yoo Young-chul was eventually put on trial for his crimes. In 2005, he was convicted of 21 murders and sentenced to death. His trial received significant media attention, with many focusing on his cold demeanor and the terrifying details of his crimes. Yoo was sentenced to death, but his execution was delayed for many years due to the legal complexities surrounding capital punishment in South Korea. He remained on death row until 2020, when it was confirmed that he would never be executed. The case of the Railer shocked the nation and raised questions about the effectiveness of the criminal justice system. His killings became one of the most infamous serial murder cases in South Korean history, leading to changes in police procedures and a greater focus on tracking down serial offenders. The case of the Raincoat Killer left a permanent scar on South Korea's sense of safety. Yoo Young-chul's reign of terror, which spanned over a year, was marked by his brutal attacks and the fear he instilled in the public. But his eventual capture brought justice to the families of his victims and closed a dark chapter in the country's criminal history. The story of Yoo Young-chul is a chilling reminder that behind some of the most horrific crimes, there are often patterns and clues that, when pieced together, can bring justice to light. His story shows how persistence and technology can eventually stop even the most elusive killers. What do you think about the investigation and capture of the Raincoat Killer? How do you think modern investigative techniques could prevent similar cases today? Let us know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe for more true crime stories.